Tip that teacher, she's been teaching you. Skip the small change, slap down a 52. Welcome to my classroom. I'm Dr. Knack, and today's topic is replacing remediation with extended metaphor. One of the pitfalls of teaching and learning, especially with students with 504s or IEPs, is how easy it is to fall into the trap of just reteaching, re-explaining, giving additional exercises, additional worksheets, additional practice. And I would argue that this doesn't work. In my experience as a classroom teacher, I have never met a student with an individual education plan who was not capable of engaging in higher order thinking. So I think one of the classic pitfalls when students struggle is to attempt to oversimplify things and explain them in ways the student understands. Students can engage in higher order thinking with the most abstract concepts. We just need to provide them with the opportunity to do so. So extended metaphor, like regular metaphor, is when we take an abstract concept and compare it to something concrete, thereby illuminating or further understanding through comparison the deeper nature of this abstract concept. So for today's lesson, I want to talk about how we use extended metaphor in the social studies classroom with something as difficult as recognizing bias in primary sources. It's one of the critical learning outcomes in social studies and civics education, not just teaching students how to read nonfiction and fiction, but also how to interpret and recognize the various factors. For example, was the author of this piece actually an observer? Were they there to record the events? Does this person, the author, have an affiliation with another organization that may cause us to think that they're viewing this historical event from a certain, perhaps biased perspective? So, like any new tool, the first thing I want to do is to introduce the tool and to explain to students the efficacy of using it. So, I'm going to put a 3-column chart on the board. I'm going to talk about what extended metaphor is. And I'm going to suggest that this is another tool for their toolkit that they can use whenever they're struggling with an abstract concept. And I'm 100% sure that even the students who struggle the most are going to do just fine with this concept. So the first thing I need to do is to choose a concept that students are struggling with in my classroom. It could be the nitrite cycle. It could be understanding the endocrine system. It could be primary sources. It could be imagery, as I talked about in my instructional scaffolding lesson. The second thing I want to do is define the efficacy of extended metaphor for their future toolkit. This is where metacognition comes into play. Giving kids a strategy that they can choose to use when they're struggling with a concept, not just in my classroom, but in other classrooms and perhaps in their careers and in college and postgraduate work as well. So I'm going to put a 3-column chart up on the board, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how it works. For the purpose of this lesson, I'm going to choose primary sources, particularly recognizing bias in primary sources. And in the first column, I'm going to place primary sources. In the second column, I'm going to label is like X or are like X. And in the third column, I'm going to label it simply because. And I'm going to explain to students that in the third column, all I'm going to do is to describe what's in the second column in as rich detail as I possibly can. And I'm going to start by modeling. And we're talking about primary sources. It is difficult for me to just pick a random metaphor or a concrete noun to compare primary sources to. So I'm going to brainstorm and show students how I do this with objects around the classroom. So I might write down in the second column lights, fluorescent lights. I might write down laptops. I might write down desks. I might write down windows. I might write down notebooks and invite students to just shout out. Again, modeling openness to brainstorming. There's no bad ideas. I'm going to write everything down. And when I have, let's say, 6, 8, 10 concepts, concrete nouns in that second column, I'm going to stop. The next step is probably the most important. And I'm going to model and think aloud and describe each of those concrete nouns in as rich detail as I possibly can. And I'm going to model tentativeness as I think about the because elements. So let's start with the first thing that came up, fluorescent lights. Okay, what are fluorescent lights? They eliminate darkness. They shed light on certain subjects. They make noise. They buzz. They frequently go out. And I'm just writing all this stuff down on the board. And I might stop at some point and look at what I've written and say, I'm not sure that that really describes the handhold that I have on understanding primary sources. Let's keep going. So now let's move on to windows. Okay, and I'm inviting the students now. Help me describe windows. They let in light, Dr. Neck. They are transparent. You can see through them. Oh, that's an interesting concept. You can see through them. Is that like a primary source? Can you see through a primary source? And as these things come up, I'm going to model this kind of aha phenomenon. Not that I've pre-thought this out, but to show them that this is also an act of discovery. But other than like shedding light on certain things, I might abandon the windows. Let's talk about laptops. Okay, what's a laptop? Let's describe it in rich detail. It's a computer. It stores all your information. It has all your programs. It's set up the way you want it to be set up. It has your files in it. And at that point, when I start hearing things like, it's yours, you can devise it the way you want to, I'm going to start modeling that starts to sound a little bit like primary sources. There's individual, independent observations on reality. Let's keep going. What about cell phones? A cell phone is like a laptop. It has all your contact information. It stores your people. You can use it to talk to others. Is it like a primary source? I don't know. Let's keep describing it. What else can we come up with? And again, and again, and again. And then I might start talking about a concrete noun, notebook. And I'm going to just start describing and spewing off the top of my head on the whiteboard or the document camera all the things that I know about a notebook. Well, a notebook has classroom notes. It records reality. It also has a reflection portion for you to go back and think about your own thoughts or to restudy, to review it. That actually is starting to sound a little bit like a primary source. It has my recordings of reality. It also has my own version and my own notes and my own thoughts on that reality. Let's leave this one out here. This seems to be getting fairly close at helping me understand bias in primary sources. Let's keep going with these concrete nouns. What else do we have? Oh, we have a chair. Oh, a chair is comfortable. It allows you to sit. It supports you. And as the kids are describing in detail, I'm asking them, does this sound at all like anything you know about primary sources? Okay. Now, we have 5 or 6 concrete nouns on the 3-column chart. We have a rich description under the because section in the 3rd column. And I'm going to model a think aloud, and I'm going to say, right now, the one that's intriguing me the most is this idea of notebooks. So I'm going to take this word and I'm going to write a sentence. Primary sources are like notebooks because, and I'm just going to spew, I'm going to brainstorm, I'm going to throw all the ideas out that I possibly can, and I'm going to keep coming up with as many as possible. And I'm going to invite students to pick anything they want off the chart. This is one of the tips for extended metaphor, is when you ask students to create their own, this is too difficult as a starting point. Give them concrete nouns that everybody has chosen. Ask them to pick the one that speaks to them, that makes them want to write, that they feel that have a string attached to their pen or pencil that's tugging at them, that's making them want to develop that extended metaphor. And let's give them some time to really write, describing in rich detail all the ways in which primary sources are like a laptop, a notebook, a cell phone, a chair, a desk, a window, a t-shirt, whatever they've chosen. The next step is to debrief the process and to call on a few students and invite them to put what they wrote under the document camera or to share it on the overhead projector and explain their thinking. Why? Why did they choose this extended metaphor? And invite students to comment and give feedback. So again, we're making thinking visible. We're not necessarily talking about primary sources. We're talking about the concrete object that's being compared to. It's easier to talk about concrete objects and for students who struggle with abstract thinking to see that the rich comparison between a concrete object and an abstract concept actually sheds a tremendous amount of deep understanding. And you will start seeing the light bulbs go off. I hope you've enjoyed this quick lesson on extended metaphor. Again, this works with every kid. Do not assume that students who struggle cannot engage in metaphorical thinking. As a matter of fact, from my own experience, some of the deepest understanding and comprehension of concepts have come about when I've used extended metaphor in the classroom.